They laughed when Hell's Angel biker married a poor black woman. Years later, they begged for mercy. When people saw a dangerous biker marry a broke foster mom, everybody laughed at them. They swore it would never work, because what could a man with a violent past possibly want with a woman who spent her life saving lost kids? But the world had no idea the storm that was coming. Because after the biker suddenly vanished, armed agents burst into her home, tearing it apart and dragging her children away. And when she found what he left behind, hidden files filled with secrets powerful men wanted buried forever, her whole life exploded. Now the same people who mocked her marriage are the ones running scared, begging the very woman they once looked down on to save them. But after everything they did to her, and everything they did to her children, why should she show mercy now? And what will she choose when the whole world is watching? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worn floorboards as Amina Clark folded the last of the donated shirts. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, creating neat piles that would soon find their way to her foster children. The familiar rhythm of sorting clothes brought her a sense of peace, even as worry about the home's finances nagged at the back of her mind. The sudden roar of a motorcycle engine shattered her concentration, making the windows rattle in their frames. Before she could react, the thunder of small feet echoed through the house as her foster children rushed to the porch, their excited whispers carried back to her through the open windows. "It's him again," 7-year-old Marcus hissed. "The motorcycle man," added Teresa, pressing her face against the window screen. Amina's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the distinctive rumble of that particular bike. Jag Steele, the former Hell's Angel, had been showing up regularly over the past few months, fixing loose boards, patching the roof, and making repairs she could never afford. Each time he barely spoke more than a few words, but his gentle way with the children contradicted everything she'd heard about his violent past. Through the window, she watched him dismount the motorcycle with fluid grace that belied his imposing size. His leather jacket couldn't hide the strength in his shoulders, and even from a distance, the scars on his hands told stories of a harder life than she could imagine. But today, something was different. In his weathered hand, he held a single sunflower, its bright yellow petals a stark contrast to his dark attire. The children scattered from the porch as he approached, but their curious faces peeked out from behind curtains and around door frames. Amina smoothed her simple dress and took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She had grown used to his presence, even come to appreciate his quiet help, but something in his demeanor today made her nervous. A soft knock echoed through the house. When she opened the door, Jag stood there, his usual confidence somehow muted. The sunflower trembled slightly in his grip. "Miss Clark," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "Amina, I need to ask you something." Across the street, Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Williams, the neighborhood's self-appointed guardians, stopped their evening constitutional to stare. Their heads bent together in whispered conversation, no doubt already planning what they'd tell the prayer circle. "Yes?" Amina found herself gripping the doorframe for support. Jag cleared his throat, looked down at his boots, then met her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air like summer lightning. Behind her, she heard gasps from the children and the distinct sound of Miss Teresa dropping her favorite stuffed bear. Across the street, Mrs. Johnson clutched Mrs. Williams's arm so hard the older woman swayed. Amina's mind whirled. This man, this former outlaw, was asking to join her unconventional family? The same man who neighborhood gossips claimed had a dark past too terrible to speak of? Yet he was also the man who had spent hours teaching Marcus to fix his bicycle, who had sat patiently while little Sarah practiced her reading. Before she could respond, the neighborhood erupted into motion. Mrs. Johnson was already on her phone, no doubt spreading the news faster than Sunday's sermon. Windows opened up and down the street as curious neighbors leaned out to watch the drama unfold. Within minutes, whispered theories flew from house to house. "He must be trying to kidnap her," one voice carried on the evening breeze. "She's after his money," another suggested, though Amina's threadbare porch and Jag's patched leather jacket told a different story. As the sun began to set, Amina found herself sitting beside Jag on the porch swing. The children had finally been coaxed inside for dinner, though their shadows still moved behind the curtains. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation, but here, in this moment, she felt an unexpected peace. "People will talk," she said softly, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "They already do." His rough fingers gently traced the edge of the sunflower's petals. "Does it matter?" Amina thought about the years she'd spent building this home, about the children who needed stability and love more than they needed society's approval. She thought about how Jag had never asked for thanks, had simply shown up when things needed fixing, both in the house and in their lives. No, she realized, it doesn't matter at all. When she finally spoke the word yes, porch lights flickered on up and down the street, illuminating watching faces in windows and doorways. But Amina barely noticed them. Instead, she found herself focused on the sunflower in her hands. Jag had pressed it into her grip when she accepted, and marveled at how God worked in mysterious ways. The petals felt like silk against her fingers as she traced their edges, remembering her grandmother's words about how love often came wrapped in unexpected packages. Here she was, a foster mother with barely enough to get by, finding her heart opening to a man the world had written off as dangerous. Yet when she looked at him now, she saw only the gentle soul who had built a treehouse for the kids, who fixed leaky faucets without being asked, who brought light into their lives one small act at a time. "The children will need time to adjust," she said, though the giggles and whispers from inside suggested they might be ahead of her on that front. "We've got time," Jag replied, his voice carrying a warmth few people ever got to hear. "All the time we need." As night settled fully over the neighborhood, Amina sat with the sunflower in her lap, wondering at the strange and beautiful ways God answered prayers. She hadn't been looking for love, had been too busy keeping her makeshift family together. But here it was, arriving on a motorcycle with a sunflower and a heart big enough to embrace them all. The morning sun streamed through the foster home's windows, casting warm patches on the worn carpet, where shoes of every size lay scattered. The house buzzed with excitement as children darted from room to room, their laughter echoing off the walls. "Miss Amina, I can't find my other blue shoe," 8-year-old Marcus called out, hopping on one foot while clutching a scuffed sneaker. Amina stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing down her simple cream-colored dress. "Check under the couch, sweetheart. That's where things usually hide." Sarah, the youngest at 5 years old, twirled in mismatched Mary Janes, one black, one pink. "I'm wearing dancing shoes," she declared proudly. "Those look perfect on you," Amina assured her, trying to calm the flutter in her own stomach. The morning had erupted into beautiful chaos, with all 7 children determined to dress their best for the courthouse ceremony. 16-year-old Jessica, the oldest, appeared in the doorway with a handful of hair ties. "Let me help with your hair, Miss Amina." Her fingers worked gently, weaving Amina's dark curls into an elegant updo. "You look beautiful," she whispered. The rumble of a motorcycle cut through the morning air, and the children rushed to the windows. "Jag's here," they chorused. Amina's heart skipped as she watched him park his bike, looking endearingly uncomfortable in a clean white button-down shirt and dark jeans. He climbed the porch steps carrying 2 large paper bags that filled the house with the smell of warm bread and eggs. "Thought everyone might need breakfast," he said, his gruff voice softening as Sarah wrapped herself around his leg. "You didn't have to do that," Amina started, but he shook his head. "Want our family to start the day right?" he replied, carefully setting out breakfast sandwiches on the kitchen table. The words, "our family," made Amina's eyes sting with happy tears. Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Williams arrived precisely at 9:30, dressed in their Sunday best, despite it being Tuesday. They eyed Jag warily, but accepted the breakfast sandwiches he offered with cautious thank yous. "We'll be praying extra hard today," Mrs. Williams informed Amina in a stage whisper, patting her arm. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, child." The courthouse stood stern and gray against the morning sky, its steps well worn from years of justice sought and delivered. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed as their unusual group made their way to the clerk's office. Amina and Jag, 7 children in mismatched shoes, and 2 elderly church ladies clutching their purses and their prayers. The clerk raised her eyebrows at the sight of them, her eyes lingering on Jag's tattoos visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves. But she processed their paperwork efficiently, if skeptically. A few curious courthouse employees and visitors gathered at the edges of the room, drawn by the unexpected sight of children trying to stay quiet and formal, but barely containing their excitement. "Do you, Jag Steele, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" His "I do" came out quiet but firm, his calloused hand gentle as it held Amina's. "Do you, Amina Clark, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Her voice carried clear and sure, even as Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Williams murmured their prayers in the background. The ride home was a parade of its own. Jag on his motorcycle, Amina in her old station wagon full of children, and the church ladies following in Mrs. Williams's ancient Buick. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as they pulled up to the foster home, where Jag had strung white lights in the backyard the day before. But it was in the living room, before their small reception could begin, that Jag revealed his surprise. He handed Amina a thick envelope, his face uncharacteristically nervous. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find legal documents. "Everything I ever earned," he said quietly. "Legal money, illegal money, all of it's clean now and in a trust. For the home, for the kids." Amina's hands trembled as she read the papers. The amount listed made her breath catch, enough to secure the foster home's future for years to come. "Jag," she whispered, "I never expected—" "I know you didn't," he cut in gently. "That's why I had to do it." The backyard reception was simple but beautiful. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the mismatched folding tables covered in potluck dishes brought by neighbors who'd decided to stop by just to see. The white string lights Jag had hung swayed in the gentle breeze, waiting for evening to transform the space into something magical. Mrs. Johnson leaned close to Mrs. Williams as they watched Jag help Sarah reach the punch bowl. "Would you look at that?" she murmured. "Maybe the biker has a heart after all." "The Lord does love a redemption story," Mrs. Williams agreed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. As evening settled over their celebration, the string lights twinkled to life. The children played an enthusiastic game of tag, their laughter carrying across the yard as they darted between adults and around tables. Amina stood beside Jag, his arm warm around her shoulders, and felt an unexpected peace settle over her heart. Looking up at this man, this person whom society had labeled dangerous, whom neighbors had whispered about in fear, she saw instead the gentle soul who had chosen to love not just her, but her entire unconventional family. In the soft glow of the lights he'd hung himself, watching the children play with complete abandon, Amina realized that sometimes the most beautiful blessings came in packages that the world misunderstood. The sounds of children's laughter, the whispered conversations of guests, and the gentle evening breeze created a symphony of contentment. Here, in this moment, surrounded by their newly formed family, everything felt right. The fear and judgment that had initially clouded their relationship had given way to something pure and true, a love that transcended society's expectations and transformed their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm patches of light across the worn linoleum floor. The sounds of children chattering and forks clinking against plates filled the air as Amina and the kids enjoyed their breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs. Little Marcus was carefully arranging his eggs into a smiley face, while Sarah helped 5-year-old Jenny butter her toast just right. Jag sat quietly at the end of the table, his eyes moving from child to child, with a protective warmth that still surprised Amina. He seemed different this morning, though, tenser, his shoulders tight beneath his clean white t-shirt. When the last plate was cleared and the kids scattered to get ready for their day, he touched Amina's arm gently. "Need to show you something," he said softly. "In the shed." Amina followed him across the backyard, noting how he scanned the neighboring houses before unlocking the shed door. Inside, the space looked ordinary enough. Garden tools hanging on the walls, boxes of holiday decorations stacked in corners, the lawn mower taking up one side. But Jag moved with purpose to the back wall, his fingers finding hidden catches in what appeared to be solid wood. A panel swung open silently, revealing a space behind it filled with computer equipment and stacks of documents. Amina's breath caught in her throat as Jag pulled out several encrypted hard drives. "For 2 years now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've been gathering evidence. There's a federal task force. They're supposed to protect kids, but they're corrupt. They target minority communities, low-income families. They make up reasons to take children away, destroy families that can't fight back in court." Amina's hands trembled as she picked up one of the folders. Inside were photographs, transcripts, official documents with incriminating notes in the margins. Her stomach clenched as she recognized some of the neighborhoods, places where families like hers lived, struggled, and loved their children with everything they had. The stuff they plant, the lies they tell in court. Jag's voice grew rough. "I've seen them destroy whole families based on nothing but prejudice and greed. The system's rigged to help them do it." "How?" Amina swallowed hard. "How did you get all this?" Jag's face darkened. "My past. It wasn't all bad people. Some of us saw things, kept records, knew someday we'd need proof." He ran a hand through his hair. "But lately, I think someone inside knows. Things feel different. Wrong." The weight of what he was sharing settled over Amina like a heavy blanket. This man she'd married, this gentle giant who brought her sunflowers and fixed loose boards on the porch, had been living with this dangerous secret all along. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked softly. "Needed to protect you. The kids." He met her eyes. "Still do. But you're my wife now. You deserve to know what might be coming." Later that afternoon, trying to push aside her growing fear, Amina sat on a park bench watching Jag with the children. He was helping 8-year-old Tommy, who'd always been too shy and anxious to try riding a bike. With infinite patience, Jag held the bicycle steady, his strong hands gentle on the handlebars. "That's it, buddy," he encouraged, as Tommy wobbled forward. "You're doing great. I've got you." Tommy's face was a mix of terror and determination as he pedaled slowly. Jag jogged alongside, one hand barely touching the bike's seat now. "See? You're riding it yourself." The look of pure joy that spread across Tommy's face when he realized he was actually doing it made Amina's heart swell, and then immediately ache. She watched Jag catch Tommy when he finally lost balance, scooping him up with a proud laugh before he could hit the ground. How could someone so gentle, so good with children, be carrying such a dangerous burden? The other kids cheered for Tommy from the playground, their voices carrying across the sunny park. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. But now Amina knew better. Her eyes scanned the park periodically, wondering if they were being watched, if someone was taking notes, making plans. That evening, after tucking the children into bed with extra tight hugs, Amina and Jag lay in the darkness of their room. His calloused hand found hers across the sheets, holding on as if anchoring himself. "Someone's been following me," he said quietly to the ceiling. "Past few days. Different cars, but always there." Amina squeezed his hand, her heart racing. "What do we do?" "For now, act normal. Love those kids. Keep them safe." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "I've got contingency plans. People who'll help if needed." They fell into an uneasy silence, both aware of the darkness gathering around their newfound happiness, both trying not to voice their deepest fears. Outside, crickets chirped their evening song, and somewhere down the street a car door slammed. Amina found herself categorizing every sound, wondering which ones might signal danger. Yet even as fear tried to take hold, she felt Jag's steady presence beside her, his hand warm and sure in hers. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, for each other, and for the children who needed them to be strong. The first hints of dawn hadn't yet touched the sky when Amina stirred awake, her hand instinctively reaching across the sheets. Cold emptiness met her fingers where Jag's warmth should have been. Her eyes flew open, scanning the dim room. "Jag?" she whispered, then louder. "Jag?" His leather jacket wasn't hanging on the door hook. His phone lay silent on the dresser, its black screen reflecting nothing. When she touched the sheets where he should have been sleeping, they were completely cold. He'd been gone for hours. Amina's heart began to race as she pulled on her robe and hurried down the hallway, checking each room. The children slept peacefully, unaware of the growing panic in her chest. In the kitchen, no coffee had been made, no note on the counter. His heavy work boots were missing from their usual spot by the back door. She stepped onto the back porch, the morning air sharp against her skin. The shed door stood slightly ajar, something Jag would never do. Inside, tools lay scattered across his workbench, drawers left open. The secret compartment where he'd shown her the files was empty. "No, no, no," she whispered, running back inside to grab her phone. Her trembling fingers dialed his number, only to hear his phone buzzing on their dresser upstairs. The sky was beginning to lighten as Amina knocked on neighbors' doors, trying not to look as desperate as she felt. Mrs. Rodriguez hadn't seen him. Mr. Johnson shook his head before she could even ask. Even old Mr. Peters, who sat on his porch at all hours, hadn't noticed Jag's motorcycle leaving. By 9 o'clock in the morning, Amina had called every hospital in the area. She'd left messages with the few contacts of Jag's she knew. The children were awake now, picking up on her anxiety as they ate their cereal, asking where Jag was. She had no answers for them. The sound of engines gunning down their quiet street made everything stop. Through the front window, Amina watched 3 black SUVs screech to a halt in front of the house. Men in dark suits and tactical gear poured out, weapons visible on their hips. "Everyone upstairs," Amina ordered the children, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Lock yourselves in the playroom. Don't come out until I call you." The youngest one started crying as they hurried up the stairs. 14-year-old Maria hesitated. "Miss Amina?" "Go," Amina insisted, pushing her toward the stairs. "Take care of the little ones." The pounding on the front door was already starting. Amina smoothed her hair, straightened her shoulders, and opened it before they could break it down. "Federal agents," a tall man in a suit announced, flashing a badge too quickly to read. "We have a warrant to search these premises." They pushed past her before she could respond, spreading through the house like a dark flood. Drawers crashed to the floor. Cushions were ripped from furniture. Pictures were torn from walls as they searched for hidden compartments. "Where is Jag Steele?" A younger agent, his name tag read Morris, got in her face, his eyes hard with something that looked like eagerness rather than duty. "I don't know," Amina answered truthfully, flinching as she heard something shatter in the kitchen. "You're harboring a criminal," Agent Morris sneered. "Aiding in a conspiracy against federal officers. Where are his files? His computers?" "I want to see your warrant," Amina demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "And I want my attorney present before any questioning." "Listen here," Morris grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in. "Those kids upstairs, one phone call and they're in the system, maybe scattered across 3 different states. Is that what you want?" Amina jerked away from him, anger replacing fear. "Touch me again, and I'll add assault to my complaint against you. Those children are under my legal protection, and you're not speaking to them without proper representation. Now show me your warrant." The search continued for over an hour. They took her laptop, her phone, even the children's tablet. When they finally left, Agent Morris lingered in the doorway. "We'll be back," he promised, his voice low. "With charges for you and removal orders for those kids. Think about that while you decide how cooperative you want to be." After their vehicles roared away, Amina called the children down. They found her in the destroyed living room, already starting to pick up the mess. Little Tommy burst into tears at the sight. 10-year-old Deshawn started silently putting books back on shelves. Maria and the older kids joined in without being asked. "It's okay," Amina assured them, though her own hands were shaking. "We'll fix it together. Everything's going to be okay." She was straightening a fallen painting when she noticed it, a floorboard that didn't quite match the others, slightly raised at one corner. Her heart stopped. Carefully, making it look like she was just cleaning, she worked the board loose. There, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small hard drive. A sticky note in Jag's handwriting read simply, "Truth." Amina slipped it into her pocket, her fingers closing around it, like a lifeline. The weight of it seemed to pulse against her hip. Proof of corruption, evidence of crimes, secrets that powerful men would kill to keep hidden. Now she was their keeper. "Miss Amina?" Tommy's small voice made her turn. He held up a broken picture frame, a photo of all of them with Jag at the park just yesterday. "Can we fix it?" Amina pulled him close, feeling the hard drive press against her side. "Yes, baby," she whispered into his hair. "We're going to fix everything." Morning light crept through the windows, finding Amina slumped at the kitchen table. She hadn't slept. The children had finally dozed off around 3 in the morning, after hours of nightmares and tears. Her own eyes felt like sand, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. With trembling fingers, she dialed Pastor Turner's number. It rang 4 times before his warm voice answered. "Child, I've been praying for you since I heard the news," he said softly. "Pastor, I need help." Amina's voice cracked. They came for Jag. They threatened to take the children. Stay where you are. I'm coming over. There was rustling on his end of the line. And I'm bringing help. Within 30 minutes, Pastor Turner arrived with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Martinez, two retired veterans from the neighborhood watch who had always looked out for the foster home. They gathered in her kitchen while the children slept upstairs. Mr. Johnson, still straight-backed despite his 70 years, spoke first. This isn't just about your man anymore, Amina. Those federal boys, they're playing for keeps. You need to get those kids somewhere safe, Mr. Martinez added, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. At least until we know what kind of storm's coming. Pastor Turner nodded gravely. Sister Margaret has that big house on Oak Street. She's taken in foster children for 30 years, knows how to keep things quiet and proper. But moving them, Amina protested weakly, is safer than leaving them here, Pastor Turner finished. We'll help you do it right. They made plans quickly, like a military operation. Mr. Johnson would drive ahead to check for surveillance. Mr. Martinez would help pack and load the van. Pastor Turner would handle the paperwork to make everything legal and above board. Get only what you absolutely need, Mr. Martinez instructed. We'll make 2 trips if we have to. Amina moved through the house like a ghost, filling bags with clothes, medications, favorite toys. The children's birth certificates and legal documents went into a special folder. She found herself touching everything twice, as if memorizing their home. The hard drive from under the floorboard went into her backpack, along with Jag's encrypted files from the shed. Mr. Martinez helped her wipe down the computers the agents had left behind. Around noon, Maria helped the younger kids pack their backpacks, while Amina made sandwiches. The children were quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. Even little Tommy didn't complain about having to leave his big toy trucks behind. Just for a little while, Amina promised them, like a vacation. Mr. Johnson returned from his reconnaissance. Streets are clear. Best time to move is now. They loaded the van methodically. Supplies first, then children. Deshaun held his sister's hand. Maria carried Tommy. They looked so small, so vulnerable. The drive to Sister Margaret's house took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Amina kept checking the rearview mirror, but Mr. Johnson and Mr. Martinez followed in their cars, keeping watch. Sister Margaret met them at the door, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her house smelled like fresh bread and furniture polish. Photos of children, dozens of them over the years, lined the walls. Your babies are safe here, she assured Amina, hugging each child as they came inside. I've got rooms ready upstairs, and my grandson installed new security cameras last month. The children settled in slowly, exploring the big old house, while Amina and Sister Margaret arranged sleeping spaces. Tommy found a toy car under a chair and started playing. Maria helped make beds, small signs of normal life returning. After dinner, Sister Margaret's famous meatloaf, Amina waited until the children were asleep before setting up her laptop in the guest room. Her hands shook as she plugged in Jag's hard drive. Files populated the screen, hundreds of them. Emails between task force members discussing which families to target. Audio recordings of agents planning evidence plants. Spreadsheets tracking seized assets and children removed from homes. Bank records showing mysterious deposits after successful raids. Tears rolled down Amina's cheeks as she read. The scope of it was staggering. Families destroyed, children traumatized, lives ruined, all for profit and power. Lord help us, she whispered, wiping her eyes. Through the wall, she could hear Tommy's soft snoring. Deshaun mumbled in his sleep. Somewhere in the big house, a clock ticked steadily. She read through the night, making notes, connecting dots. The sky began to lighten outside her window. Birds started their morning songs, and in that quiet moment between night and day, Amina made her decision. These men had tried to intimidate her. They'd threatened her children. They'd taken Jag, but they had underestimated her. She was a mother, not just to her foster children, but to every child these corrupt agents had stolen. The truth in her hands could bring down their whole operation. It would be dangerous. She might lose everything. But as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Amina knew she had no choice. Some things were worth any risk. She touched the screen where Jag's notes glowed. "I'll finish what you started," she whispered. "For all of them." The early morning light filtered through Sister Margaret's lace curtains as Amina reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over Mutt's number, the one Jag had made her memorize just in case. She'd only met the grizzled biker a few times, but she remembered how Jag had pulled her aside at their small wedding reception. "If anything ever happens to me," he'd said, his voice low and serious, "Mutt will watch out for you. He's promised me." Now, watching her sleeping children sprawled across Sister Margaret's guest beds, Amina pressed dial. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah? Mutt, it's Amina, Jag's..." She swallowed hard. "Jag's wife." There was a long pause. "Stay where you are. We're coming." Within an hour, the rumble of motorcycles echoed down Sister Margaret's quiet street. Mutt arrived with 2 other older bikers, men with silver hair peeking out from under bandanas and leather vests worn soft with age. They moved with the careful dignity of reformed warriors, treating Sister Margaret's home with quiet respect. "Ma'am," Mutt said, removing his bandana as he entered. His weathered face was creased with concern. "Jag told us this might happen. We're here to help." The other 2 men introduced themselves as Doc and Preacher, their road names from years past. Sister Margaret brought them coffee while they discussed security measures. Doc, who'd worked in construction before retiring, spotted weak points in the old house's structure. "We'll reinforce these window frames," he said, touching the worn wood. "Add better locks, maybe some motion sensors." Preacher, who despite his nickname looked more like a retired accountant, pulled out a laptop. "I know someone at the paper, investigative reporter named Sarah Chen. She's broken stories about corruption before. Trustworthy." While the men worked, Amina gathered the children in Sister Margaret's spacious kitchen. The morning sun streamed through windows that overlooked a small vegetable garden. She'd brought their school books, determined to maintain some normalcy. "Okay, everyone," she said, setting up workbooks at the big oak table. "Just because we're having an adventure doesn't mean we skip our lessons." Maria, 13 and serious about her studies, immediately opened her math book. Deshaun pretended to groan, but got out his reading assignment. Even 6-year-old Tommy settled down with his alphabet practice. The familiar routine seemed to calm them. Outside, they could hear the steady sounds of hammering as Doc installed new locks. Sister Margaret puttered around the kitchen, showing Maria how to knead bread dough between math problems. Around noon, Preacher came in with news. "Sarah Chen wants to meet. Says she's been trying to crack this task force for months, but couldn't get solid evidence." Amina nodded, stirring the big pot of chili she'd started. The rich smell filled the kitchen, making everything feel more like home. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Secure location." He paused. "You sure about this? Once it starts?" "I'm sure," Amina said firmly, adding another pinch of cumin to the pot. These people hurt families. They're still hurting families. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Doc installed security cameras while Mutt taught Deshaun how to check if anyone was following them. "Just in case, kid." Sister Margaret showed the children her garden, letting them pick fresh tomatoes for dinner. As evening approached, they gathered around the big table. The chili bubbled in bowls, accompanied by Sister Margaret's fresh bread. It felt almost normal, like a big, strange family dinner. The bikers had shed their leather vests, revealing grandfatherly sweaters beneath. Tommy had decided Doc was his new best friend and wouldn't eat unless sitting next to him. After the meal, while Sister Margaret supervised bath time upstairs, Mutt pulled Amina aside. His face was tense with barely contained emotion. "Got word from one of our old contacts," he said quietly. "Trucker saw Jag early yesterday morning about 50 miles north. He was beat up pretty bad, but he was moving under his own power." Amina's heart leaped. "He's alive?" "Sounds like it. Fighting, too, from what we heard." Mutt's weathered face softened. "That man's got 9 lives and something worth coming home to. Don't count him out yet." Tears pricked at Amina's eyes, but she blinked them back. Hope bloomed in her chest like a flower reaching for sunlight. Upstairs, she could hear the children laughing as Sister Margaret told them a bedtime story. Later, after everyone was settled, the bikers taking turns watching the security cameras, Sister Margaret knitting in her favorite chair, the children finally asleep. Amina lay in her borrowed bed. The thumb drive pressed against her chest where she'd hung it on a cord around her neck. "Lord," she whispered into the darkness, "keep him safe. Bring him home." Her fingers curled around the drive. "And give me the strength to finish what he started." The night settled around her like a blanket, and for the first time since Jag disappeared, she felt the steel in her spine matching the hope in her heart. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, knowing Jag was alive and fighting, she could rest. Through her window, she could see Mutt's silhouette as he patrolled the garden, keeping watch. In the next room, Tommy's nightlight cast star patterns on the ceiling. All around her, people had come together to protect what mattered most. Maybe that's what Jag had been doing all along, protecting not just her and the children, but all the families who needed someone to stand up for them. Amina closed her eyes, still holding the drive close. Sleep came easier than she expected, carried on prayers for Jag's safety and dreams of justice to come. The old church basement smelled of coffee and dusty hymnals. Amina sat across from Sarah Chen at a scarred folding table, watching the journalist's face as she scrolled through the initial files. "This is extensive," Sarah said quietly, her fingers hovering over the laptop screen. 2 years of surveillance, financial records, internal communications. She looked up at Amina. "Your husband gathered all this?" "Yes." Amina's hands twisted in her lap. "He said they were targeting families, especially in poorer neighborhoods, minority communities." Sarah nodded grimly. "I've been tracking similar patterns, but could never get concrete proof." She gestured to a locked folder on the screen. "What's in here?" "I don't know yet," Amina admitted. "It's the last encrypted drive. Jag said it contained everything needed to bring them down, but we need to crack it first." Sarah's eyes were kind but determined. "I have some contacts who might help, but it could take days, and time isn't on our side." Amina straightened her shoulders. "Then I'll do it myself. Today." Back at Sister Margaret's house, Amina set up her laptop at the kitchen table. The elderly woman kept her supplied with strong coffee and encouragement while she worked through online encryption tutorials. Outside, laughter drifted through the open windows. Mutt was teaching the kids to play horseshoes in the backyard. Doc had somehow produced bubble wands from his motorcycle saddlebags, and Tommy was chasing rainbow bubbles across the grass. "Who knew bikers could be such softies?" Sister Margaret chuckled, bringing Amina another cup of coffee. Through the window, they watched as Maria hesitantly approached Bear, the largest and most intimidating of the bikers. He was sitting on the back steps, looking uncomfortable in his leather vest despite the warm day. Sir? Maria asked. Could you help me practice my reading? Miss Amina usually listens, but she's busy today. Bear's weathered face softened. Sure, kid. What are we reading? Charlotte's Web. Maria pulled the book from behind her back. Good choice. Bear patted the step beside him. My daughter loved that one when she was your age. Amina smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. These men, who most people crossed the street to avoid, had become their unlikely guardian angels. Hours passed. Amina's eyes burned from staring at the screen. She'd tried dozens of combinations, following every tutorial she could find. Nothing worked. Take a break, Sister Margaret urged. You're exhausting yourself. But Amina couldn't stop. Somewhere out there, Jag was fighting to stay alive. Other families were being torn apart. She had to keep trying. The afternoon light was fading when something clicked. A memory surfaced. Jag showing her the sunflower on the day he proposed. He'd said something about how they grow toward the light, no matter how dark things get. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, trying a new combination. The screen flickered. Files began appearing. Oh my God, Amina whispered. Sister Margaret, I did it! The children came running at her cry. Video files, internal memos, detailed records of illegal seizures. Everything was there. Evidence of systematic targeting, false accusations, families destroyed for profit. You did it! Deshawn hugged her tight. Now Mr. Jag can come home, right? Soon, baby. Amina hugged him back, her heart full of hope and determination. Very soon. The bikers gathered around as she began copying the files. Mutt's expression grew darker with each revelation. Those bastards, he muttered. No wonder Jag risked everything. Working quickly, Amina packaged everything into secure files and sent them to Sarah Chen. Her hands were shaking, but her heart felt strong. Finally, they had proof. The children insisted on celebrating. Sister Margaret produced ice cream from her freezer, and they all gathered in the living room. Even the bikers accepted bowls, though Bear tried to maintain his gruff exterior while eating rainbow sprinkles. Tommy crawled into Amina's lap. Miss Amina, when Mr. Jag comes back, can we have ice cream again? Of course, sweetheart. She kissed his curly head. We'll have the biggest celebration ever. As night settled over the house, Amina sat at the kitchen table, watching the confirmation that Sarah had received the files. Her laptop glowed in the dimness, a beacon of truth finally unveiled. In the living room, the children were teaching the bikers to play Uno. Sister Margaret hummed as she washed dishes. For a moment, despite everything, peace settled over Amina's heart. She didn't notice the blinking light on her laptop, tracking her location. The first rays of sunlight were just beginning to paint the sky when Amina heard the sirens. Her heart leaped into her throat as the wailing grew louder, closer. She jumped from the kitchen chair where she'd fallen asleep, her laptop still glowing on the table. Wake up! She screamed, running towards the bedrooms. Everyone up! Now! Sister Margaret emerged from her room, clutching her robe. Lord have mercy! The front door exploded inward with a deafening crack. Black-clad figures poured through the splintered frame, weapons raised. Children's screams pierced the air as armed agents stormed every room. Get down! Hands where we can see them! Agent Morris's voice boomed through the chaos. Mutt and the other bikers rushed to form a human shield around the children. Bear wrapped his massive arms around Maria and Tommy, trying to shelter them from the violence. Doc stood in front of Deshawn, hands raised. Easy now, Mutt growled. There's kids here. But the agents showed no mercy. They struck with brutal efficiency, shocking Bear with a taser. He collapsed, and the children scattered like frightened birds. Maria's shriek as they pulled her from his limp arms would haunt Amina forever. Stop! Amina lunged forward, but rough hands seized her arms. Cold metal bit into her wrists as handcuffs clicked shut. "They're just children! Please!" "Amina Clark," Agent Morris sneered, yanking her towards the door. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." She struggled against his grip. "This is insane. I'm their legal guardian." "Not anymore." He shoved her forward, making her stumble in her worn pajamas. The morning air bit through the thin fabric as they dragged her outside. Neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door stood on her porch, hands pressed to her mouth in horror. Mr. Chen from the corner store shook his head sadly. "Call my pastor," Amina shouted to them. "Please, the children." Agent Morris roughly pushed her into the back of a police van. Through the mesh barrier, she watched helplessly as the agents led the crying children to separate vehicles. Deshawn fought like a wild thing, kicking and screaming. Tommy just went limp, tears streaming down his face. Maria kept calling Amina's name until an agent clamped a hand over her mouth. The bikers were being handcuffed and loaded into other vans. Mutt caught her eye through the window and nodded once, a silent promise that he wouldn't give up. Sister Margaret stood in her doorway, rosary beads clicking through trembling fingers as she prayed. The morning sun caught the tears on her weathered cheeks. The van door slammed shut, and Amina was plunged into semi-darkness. The vehicle lurched forward, sirens wailing. Through the small window, she watched her neighborhood recede, along with everything she loved. At the police station, they processed her like a hardened criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, rough hands pushing her from station to station. Her requests for a lawyer were ignored. By midday, the smear campaign was in full swing. Through the bars of her holding cell, she caught glimpses of news reports on the break-room television. Former foster mother Amina Clark arrested in shocking kidnapping case. Sources say Clark was working with known criminal elements. Evidence suggests long-term conspiracy involving biker gangs. Hour after hour dragged by. The concrete bench was cold and hard. Her thin pajamas offered no warmth, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the agony of not knowing where they'd taken her children. Other inmates came and went. A drunk woman sang off-key for 2 hours. A young girl sobbed quietly in the corner. Amina barely noticed them. Her mind kept replaying the morning's horror, the children's screams, their terrified faces, the brutal efficiency with which their family had been torn apart. Night fell. The cell block grew quiet except for distant voices and the occasional clang of metal doors. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. Amina curled into a tight ball on the narrow bunk, hugging her knees to her chest. The tears she'd been holding back all day finally broke free, soaking into the thin mattress. "Please," she whispered into the darkness. "Jag, if you're alive, please help us." Her voice cracked on the last word. In the empty cell, there was no answer but silence. She thought of Tommy, who still had nightmares about his last foster home. Of Maria, who'd finally started to trust adults again. Of Deshawn, who'd been bounced through 7 homes before finding stability with her. Where were they now? Were they together? Or had the agents separated them? Were they scared? Hungry? Did anyone hold them while they cried? The questions tormented her as the night wore on. Her body ached from the hard bunk, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in her chest. She'd promised to protect them, to give them the stable home they deserved. Now they were gone, snatched away by the very system she'd been fighting. Somewhere in the dark hours, exhaustion finally pulled her under. But even in sleep, she couldn't escape. Her dreams were filled with breaking doors, screaming children, and Jag's face, just out of reach, calling to her through the chaos. "I'm sorry," she murmured in her troubled sleep. "I'm so sorry." The cell's harsh lights never dimmed, casting stark shadows on the concrete walls. In one corner, a spider had built a delicate web. Amina watched it through half-closed eyes, remembering Maria reading Charlotte's Web to Bear just yesterday. Had it only been yesterday? It felt like a lifetime ago. She shifted on the bunk, her muscles protesting. The thin pajamas offered no protection against the cell's chill, but the cold that had settled in her bones went deeper than physical discomfort. It was the bone-deep chill of helplessness, of watching everything you love being torn away while you stand powerless to stop it. "Jag," she whispered again into the emptiness. "If you're alive, please help us." The words echoed softly off the concrete walls, unanswered. In the distance, a door clanged shut and someone coughed, but no help came. No rescue appeared. There was only the buzz of fluorescent lights, the whisper of her own breathing, and the weight of fear pressing down like a physical thing. Amina curled tighter around herself, trying to hold on to hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. But in the cold reality of her cell, hope felt as fragile as a spider's web. Beautiful, intricate, and terrifyingly easy to destroy. Morning light filtered weakly through the high window of Amina's cell, but she barely noticed. She hadn't really slept, drifting in and out of troubled dreams filled with children's cries and shattering doors. Her body ached from the hard bunk, and her eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. The cell block stirred to life around her. Metal doors clanged. Voices echoed off concrete walls. Footsteps approached and retreated. Amina stayed curled on her side, too drained to move. "Hey!" A soft voice made her look up. A guard stood at her cell, younger than the others, with kind eyes that reminded her of Maria. "Breakfast?" she said, sliding a tray through the slot. Amina managed a weak "thank you," but couldn't bring herself to touch the cold eggs and limp toast. The guard glanced quickly over her shoulder, then leaned closer to the bars. "Someone left this for you," she whispered. "Didn't want to be seen." Her hand slipped through, holding a folded piece of paper. Amina's heart jumped. With trembling fingers, she took the note. The guard gave her a quick nod and hurried away, keys jingling softly. The paper was creased and slightly dirty, like it had passed through several hands. Amina unfolded it carefully, afraid to hope. 4 words jumped out at her, written in a familiar scrawl. "I'm alive. Hold on." Tears flooded her eyes, blurring the words. Jag's handwriting, his message. He was alive. She pressed the paper to her chest, letting the tears fall freely now. Around her, the morning routine of the jail continued, doors opening and closing, voices calling, footsteps echoing. But none of it mattered. Jag was alive. The morning crawled by. Amina kept the note hidden in her pajama pocket, touching it occasionally to remind herself it was real. She dozed fitfully, too exhausted to stay fully awake but too worried to truly sleep. Shortly after noon, something changed. The usual rhythm of the jail shifted. There was more movement, raised voices, a sense of urgency in the air. A television blared from the break room. "Breaking news! Shocking evidence reveals systematic corruption in federal task force." Amina sat up straighter, straining to hear. Thousands of documents exposing illegal seizures targeting minority and low-income families. Multiple agencies implicated in what appears to be a nationwide scandal. The journalist had done it. He'd released the files. More voices joined the chorus. Different channels, different reporters, all telling the same story. The truth was finally coming out. Throughout the afternoon, the momentum built. News anchors interviewed experts. Victims began calling in, sharing similar stories of children taken on false pretenses. Government officials stammered through damage control statements. Politicians demanded investigations. The guard with kind eyes appeared again, this time with a small radio. "Thought you might want to hear," she said softly, setting it near Amina's cell. Hour by hour, the story grew. Social media exploded with outrage. Protest crowds gathered outside government buildings. The task force's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. Late in the afternoon, new voices entered the jail. Sharp, authoritative voices demanding to see Amina Clark. "Our client has been illegally detained. Clear violation of civil rights. Immediate release." Lawyers, multiple lawyers, from different civil rights organizations, all fighting for her freedom. The process wasn't quick, but it was decisive. Papers were signed, arguments were made. Finally, as evening approached, Amina heard footsteps approaching her cell. "Miss Clark?" A woman in a crisp suit stood with several officers. "We're here to escort you out." The cell door opened. Amina stood on shaky legs, still in her wrinkled pajamas, clutching Jag's note in her pocket. They led her through the jail's corridors, past curious faces and whispered conversations. With each step, the sound of voices grew louder, not angry voices, but cheering. The exit doors opened. Amina blinked in the sudden brightness. Camera flashes exploded around her. Crowds lined the street, holding signs, cheering her name. Journalists shouted questions. Supporters reached out to touch her hands. "Ms. Clark, how does it feel to be vindicated? What's your message to other families? Are you afraid of retaliation?" The questions washed over her in a wave. Amina couldn't answer. Her throat was too tight, her heart too full. The crowd's energy swirled around her. Their anger at injustice, their joy at truth revealed, their hope for change. But beneath it all, Amina felt the weight of what lay ahead. The children were still missing. The corrupt officials still held power. And somewhere out there, Jag was fighting his own battles. The lawyers guided her through the crowd toward a waiting car. More flashes, more cheers, more questions. Amina clutched the note in her pocket, holding on to those 4 precious words like a lifeline. She was free, but this was just the beginning. The next morning dawned bright and cold. Amina stood outside a plain brick building, her heart pounding as social workers led her through the entrance. The temporary shelter smelled of bleach and instant coffee, but none of that mattered when she heard familiar voices down the hall. "Miss Amina!" The children burst through a doorway, running toward her with tears streaming down their faces. Little Marcus reached her first, wrapping his arms around her waist. Sarah and Tommy crashed into her next, followed by the others. Soon, Amina was surrounded by sobbing children, their hands clutching her clothes as if afraid she might disappear again. "I'm here," she whispered, dropping to her knees to hold them properly. "I'm here now. It's okay." The social workers stood back, their own eyes glistening. One of them, Ms. Peterson, stepped forward with tissues. "They've been asking for you non-stop," she said softly. We had no idea what was really happening. I'm so sorry." Amina nodded, unable to speak as she wiped tears from small faces. Sarah, the oldest at 16, touched Amina's cheek. "We knew you'd come back. We knew you didn't do anything wrong." A television mounted in the corner caught everyone's attention as breaking news flashed across the screen. Images showed federal agents being led away in handcuffs, high-ranking officials rushing from buildings with coats over their heads, office boxes being carried out of government buildings. "More arrests today as the investigation into systematic corruption continues," the reporter announced. Multiple whistleblowers have come forward, confirming allegations that the task force deliberately targeted vulnerable families. The children watched with wide eyes as Amina held them close. 8-year-old, Tommy pointed at the screen. "Are those the bad people who took us away?" "Yes," Amina answered carefully, "but they can't hurt anyone anymore. Look, all those people are working to make things right." Throughout the morning, more news poured in. Resignations from department heads, investigations launched in multiple states, families coming forward with similar stories. Everything Jag had documented, everything he'd risked his life to expose, was being confirmed piece by piece. Shortly after lunch, Amina's lawyers arrived. "The media wants a statement," they explained. "People need to hear from you directly." Amina hesitated, looking at the children. Ms. Peterson stepped forward. "We'll watch them. They'll be safe." The press conference was set up outside the shelter. Cameras pointed at a simple podium as Amina stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Thank you for believing in truth. Thank you for standing up for families who couldn't stand up for themselves. This isn't about me. It's about every child who was wrongfully taken, every parent who was falsely accused, every community that was deliberately targeted." She carefully avoided mentioning Jag, though her heart ached with each word left unsaid. His sacrifice had made this possible, but speaking his name might put him in danger. The questions came rapid fire afterward. Amina answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and finally returned inside to the children's waiting arms. That evening, as shelter staff set up cots for the night, Amina helped the kids settle in. She tucked blankets around small shoulders, kissed foreheads, and promised tomorrow would be better. "Miss Amina?" Marcus whispered in the dim light. "Are we going home soon?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer. She read it twice, her hands shaking slightly. "Congress is launching a formal investigation," she told the children softly, "based on all the evidence we helped uncover. Do you know what that means?" They shook their heads, watching her intently. "It means our whole world is about to change," she said, pulling the blanket up to Marcus's chin. "And this time it's changing for the better." The children snuggled into their cots, some already drifting off to sleep. Amina sat between them, a quiet guardian in the darkness, her heart full of hope for tomorrow, but still aching for the one person missing from their circle. The seasons changed slowly as justice took its course. Summer faded to fall, then winter, and finally spring bloomed again. Through it all, Amina and the children found their way forward, one day at a time. Their temporary housing wasn't fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom apartment provided by a victim's assistance program. But it felt like heaven compared to the shelter. The children decorated their rooms with drawings and hand-me-down posters. They went back to school. They started to smile again. Amina attended every hearing, sitting straight-backed in courtrooms as testimony after testimony confirmed the corruption they'd exposed. She spoke at reform committees, her quiet strength commanding attention as she described how the system had failed so many families. "The foster system should protect children," she told one panel, her voice steady, "not traumatize them for profit." Her face appeared on news programs and magazine covers. People started recognizing her at the grocery store, reaching out to shake her hand or share their own stories. She became known as the foster mom who fought back, a symbol of courage and integrity in the face of powerful opposition. Then came the day she dreaded most. The disgraced officials who had once terrorized her family now sat across from her in a stark government conference room, their expensive suits replaced by prison orange. Their faces, once smug with authority, now showed desperate hope as they appealed to her conscience. "Mrs. Clark," one former task force leader began, his voice breaking. We're asking for your mercy. A word from you could reduce our sentences significantly. You're a woman of faith. Surely you believe in second chances." Amina looked at each face around the table. She remembered how they'd torn apart her home, frightened her children, threatened her with arrest. She remembered the other families they'd destroyed, the lives they'd carelessly shattered. "I do believe in second chances," she said quietly. "And I forgive you, because that's what my faith teaches me to do." She paused, meeting their eager eyes. "But forgiveness doesn't mean escaping consequences. You knew what you were doing was wrong. You did it anyway. I won't help you avoid paying for those choices." She stood, gathering her purse with steady hands. Outside, cameras flashed as she walked down the building steps, head held high. Reporters called questions, but she kept walking. Her work here was done. That evening, she tucked the children into bed, just like always. Marcus wanted an extra story. Sarah needed help with algebra homework. Tommy had lost another tooth. Normal, precious moments that felt like miracles after everything they'd been through. As she turned out the last light, Amina felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, no matter how hard it was. A full year passed, bringing healing and new beginnings. Spring flowers dotted the lawn of a beautiful Victorian house that stood proud on the corner of Maple Street. Fresh paint gleamed in the afternoon sun, warm yellow with white trim, nothing like the peeling gray it had worn before. Renovations had transformed the once struggling foster home into something magical, funded by donations that poured in from across the country. Amina stood in the bright new kitchen, surrounded by marble countertops and modern appliances donated by people moved by her story. The children's excited voices echoed through halls now lined with colorful artwork. Upstairs, bedrooms waited with fresh linens and handmade quilts sent by supporters. Everything felt like a dream. "Miss Amina," 10-year-old Sarah called from the front window. "There's someone coming up the drive." The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything golden. Amina wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the door, expecting another well-wisher or reporter. But the familiar rumble approaching made her heart stop. A motorcycle pulled into the driveway, its rider moving with a slight limp as he dismounted. The children who had been setting the table for dinner abandoned their tasks and pressed against the windows. "Is that?" Marcus whispered, his eyes wide. Tommy, the youngest at 6 years old, was the first to burst through the screen door. "Jag!" Like a dam breaking, all 8 children flooded across the yard. Jag knelt despite his obvious stiffness, gathering them into his arms as they crashed into him. His leather jacket was weathered, his face bore new scars, but his smile was exactly as Amina remembered. She stood frozen on the porch, one hand pressed to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision as she took in every detail: the slight favor of his left leg, the gray at his temples that hadn't been there before, the gentle way he touched each child's face, as if making sure they were real. Then he looked up, meeting her eyes across the yard. The children parted like a wave as he walked toward her, his limp more pronounced with each step. When he reached the bottom of the porch steps, he paused. "I promised I'd come home," he said softly. Amina's legs carried her down the steps before she realized she was moving. She touched his face with trembling fingers, tracing the new scar that ran along his jaw. "Where have you been?" "Healing, making sure it was safe to return." His voice was rough with emotion. "I watched the news, saw everything you did. You're amazing, you know that?" She pulled him close, breathing in leather and motor oil and life. The children swarmed around them, creating a group hug that made Jag wince but smile. Later that evening, They gathered in the dining room under warm lights. The table was bigger now, room for more children who would need sanctuary. A hand-carved sign hung over the doorway, reading, "The Last Outlaw Sanctuary," their new name, chosen to honor both their past and their purpose. Amina watched as Jag lifted a curly-haired toddler into a high chair, his movements gentle despite his scarred hands. The little girl had arrived just last week, scared and silent. Now she reached for Jag's beard with complete trust, giggling when he made a silly face. Around the table, the children chatted and passed dishes, a family pieced together by love rather than blood. Marcus proudly told Jag about making the honor roll. Sarah showed off her new basketball trophy. Tommy had lost 2 more teeth. Visitors came often. Now, seeking advice on reforming foster care systems in their own states. Social workers attended workshops in their conference room. Former gang members volunteered as mentors, inspired by Jag's transformation. The same neighborhood that had once whispered and stared now brought welcome baskets to new foster children. The church ladies who had prayed for protection now taught art classes in the activity room. Even the federal building where Amina had once been, dragged in handcuffs, now displayed a plaque honoring her courage. Amina reached for Jag's hand under the table, feeling the rough calluses, the strength still there despite everything he'd endured. He squeezed back, and she knew he was thinking the same thing, how far they'd come from that first day with a single sunflower and an unlikely proposal. The world had laughed then, unable to see how love could bloom in such unlikely soil. But now people traveled hundreds of miles just to sit in their living room, learning how faith could move mountains and love could change laws. The sunset painted the dining room gold through windows, no longer covered by security bars. Children's laughter filled every corner of the house. And in Jag's eyes, Amina saw the same quiet certainty she'd trusted on that very first day. The knowledge that sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.